This is the front face of the northern Rocky Mountain chain, just a few miles north of the Montana border in southern Alberta, at a place called the Hawk's Nest. Hello, I'm Ian Tyson. I'm here to introduce you to a friend of mine, an extraordinary man, whose name is Andy Russell. We're going to show you an extraordinary film that Andy Russell made back in the early 60s called Grizzly Country, at a time long before the conservation movement and the environmental movement that's so popular today. Andy was following the great bears and living in their habitat in the high country and making some of the very first film footage of these wonderful animals. So come inside the Hawk's Nest with me. We'll meet my friend Andy Russell.
Ian, it's good to see you again. Gosh, it's great to have you here at Hawk's Nest, and welcome.
It's good to see you in this beautiful place. I've heard a lot about it, and it's great to be here. And I want to ask you, how did all this start with the bears?
A long time ago, a long time ago. You deal with what you meet in life by what you have lived, and I was lucky enough to be born of parents that were the kind that didn't insist on me working every hour of the day. I had free time to wander in bear country, and I did. I fished, and when I got old enough to pick up both ends of a gun at once, I hunted. And I guess that it's just exposure got started in the thing, and it went on from there.
What gave you the idea for the film? You didn't have any money, did you, to make a film?
No, I had a hard time finding enough, but I never did have enough money for that film. But somehow or another, managed to claw our way through, and it was a matter of realizing that we had misjudged the bear all these years. Getting ready for this expedition, which was a series of expeditions, cost quite a bit of money. I was in New York looking for funds and telling the people that were interested there what I was planning to do. And I wasn't getting anywhere. And I was told pretty flatly by one guy that if I insisted on doing what I was suggesting I was going to do, he said, "You'll be killed. They'll kill you like looking at you." And I looked at him and I didn't say anything, but I had been living with bears all my life, and I wasn't all that convinced that I was going to get killed if I took their picture. And so I went off, and I came back 2 years later, and I showed the film. I don't think it was the same man, but it was somebody pretty high up said, "He's faking it."
He's faking it?
Yep. I got such a kick out of this. How the hell could anybody possibly fake such a piece of film like this? I had pictures of grizzlies, head and shoulder shots, taken from 20, 30 yards. And the bears aren't even looking at the camera. In all this film that we have in this Grizzly Country, there's only one place in that film where the bear is obviously staring at the photographer. And that was the one that came up within 17 feet of me. And decided that there was something wrong. I could tell by the look on his face. And he turned and went away. I measured it to the point where he turned in front of my camera. It was 17 feet, measured feet. I thought, I don't want him any closer than that.
No. You told me once that when you stopped packing firearms and packing a rifle in your interaction with bears, that their whole perception changed.
That was after we started filming them.
How do you figure that?
I really haven't figured that out. It gets awful close to the spiritual.
Yes, it is.
Very close. And I'm willing to let it rest there. I think that's exactly what it is. I'm sure.
Nothing wrong with mystery, is there?
No, there's nothing wrong with mystery.
When you started that film, did you realize that it was going to take you all, filming the bears, the great bears, did you realize it was going to take you all the way up to, you went all the way to Alaska, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. We were right up there in the middle of what's now Denali Park. And, oh, man, you talk about big country and tough country. And the kind of country where you don't make mistakes because you're not allowed to get another chance to make anymore. You travel with care and respect. And that's about all it is respect.
Andy, we've both got kids, and you and I, we both know that kids don't always want to do what you hope that they're going to do, and they don't always take good direction like good little actors. And
tell me about it.
I mean, what did your boys think of being way out in the back of beyond, way out in the wilderness? How did that work out so well for you? Maybe you've got something you can tell us about that.
Well, we worked very well together, and I had no quarrel with the way they handled the job, ever. They were very good at it. Oh, they had their own opinions, and we listened to each other. We'd have a discussion, and we'd talk over something that maybe was a little bit out of line or whatever, but it was no problem. The only time I ever got really uptight was when we drove home, and they'd get in a hurry to get home, and hell, it's 2,500 miles from here. In those days, the road was gravel on the Alaska Highway and dust. And I had limits about what you could do with an automobile in those circumstances. The way that things got a little tight there once or twice, but not for very long. They listened to reason.
They were pretty young guys.
They were very young, yeah. It's one thing to have a theory, and another thing to watch your boys testing the theory and successfully, but things get a bit thick.
You mean things get a little risky
just
along the way?
I remember Charlie came to his birthday in 1963 when we were there, and I'm going to celebrate my birthday. I'm going to go by myself. I'm tired of wandering around with cameras and stuff. I'm just going to go with myself and look and see some country. We watched him cross the Toklat and go up the mountain the other side, a mile and a half away. And as he goes up onto a ridge, and we could see both sides of the ridge from our angle. Here comes a grizzly up the ridge from the other side, and they're going to meet at the top. That was something to watch from a distance.
Nothing you could do about it, I don't suppose.
Absolutely nothing. We had no way of communicating, but we didn't figure we needed to. Charlie and the bear walked within 50 feet of each other on up the ridge, one on each side, and disappeared. And come 6 o'clock at night, I said to Dick, I said, God, I got to get some supper together here, but I'm going to wait till Charlie comes back. I said, I hope you don't stay all night out there. Oh, Dick said, he'll be back. And I got my glasses and I'm watching, and sure enough, he comes down off the mountain on the other side on the trail. He went up, but what trail there wasn't much. And he crossed the big flats in front of us and came up to camp, and he was all excited about having met a bear and all this. And we said, you don't have to tell us, we're watching the whole show. That was really quite something, and that was the way it was. Dick was out one day, and we did one thing, and we had regulations that we didn't break most of the time. And one of the things was, if there was a mound of gravel, a big rock, or a clump of brush, you didn't walk up to it from the blind side without letting everything know that you were doing it. And if possible, you went out here or out here, so you could see what was on the other side. Dick forgot that one night in a hurry coming down off the mountain where he'd been up on a solo tour himself, and he'd found a sheep horn, a big sheep horn, the doll sheep from up there. And there was a slope where there'd been a big avalanche, and a lot of talus was laying in heaps. And Dick's shortcutting down through that stuff, and he's going at a pretty good clip, and he came to the backside of one of these mounds of rock and started up the other side of him. All of a sudden, there was a bear there right in front of him. It wasn't 15 feet from him. Very surprised grizzly. To say nothing of a surprised guy that was looking at him. The bear opened his mouth and snarled and stepped toward Dick. Dick stood his ground, never backed up an inch. And he took his horn up over his head, and he told that bear, if you come any closer to me, I'm going to knock your brains out. And the bear stopped and thought it over and backed up and then turned around like a greyhound. Down into the timber and disappeared. Dick got to camp that night. He had a story to tell. He was so excited he could hardly talk.
Somewhere along the way, the bears were figuring out the difference between a gun and a camera.
They must have always had it, because a camera's big and it's obvious and it's noisy. And you got to remember, this was 60s, 35 years ago. Cameras were different. Film was different. We had to be very close. We had to have all kinds of light. And the way the camera was, spring wound, no electricity stuff. We had to be careful, we had to be tough, and we had to have nerve. I saw Charlie go do something one day with a big sow and had a nice little cub, little lone cub. And I'd found out the day before that she was blind. Charlie is with me, and he knows this. And like Charlie would do, he was waited for the wind to get up and gusts, and she's busy feeding the baby. She's got herself all spread out, and he's going from one dug to another and getting his milk. And Charlie walks up within 25 yards of her and films her. And the wind went down, and he's so completely wrapped up in taking pictures that he doesn't keep track of the noise barrier that's been hang off. And the wind dies, and the picture that he's got, and it's in the film, it's in Grizzly Country. You can just see her eyes suddenly change the expression. And she picks her head up, and then she gets up on her feet. And the little cub's standing beside her with his paw on her shoulder. And hell, they're not 25 yards from him. And there was a very tense moment, and then she decided that maybe she better go, and she walked out of there. She didn't run. She walked. She'd never really figured out what it was that spooked her. But, this sort of thing, revealing, very revealing, but also scary. I mean, I'll never forget that. A recognition of something there that shouldn't be from her. And believe me, she was tuned up because she was blind. And she was tuned up otherwise. She had a nose and ears that were taking up the slack. And here Charlie walked away from there with it, never ruffled his hair. But he got a whale of a sequence. Wow.
You were approaching bears and living beside bears and making friends with bears and communicating with bears. But are you suggesting that the great American and Canadian tourist come into Waterton Park and walk up and take a picture of a bear? Is that what you're saying?
No, I would suggest, or I would ask with respect, all people to treat them with the greatest respect and not walk up to them. Because all it takes is one mistake. What people don't know is what a bear will put up with and what a bear won't put up with. And they don't stop and argue about it for very long. I'm telling you, they're coming as they're crossed or figure they're threatened. Sometimes it's very easy to do something that constitutes a threat.
The conservation of today, the direction they're going in, what would you like to see more of or less of?
Well, I think they're headed the right direction. In some issues, I think probably they could do better if they did it different, but so long as we're headed in the right direction, it's pretty hard to be too critical too, you know. You can kind of influence people and say, oh, this is the way I see it. But you better not be too rough on them because they're trying. And Lord help me, I've been a long ways and I didn't see anybody trying.
That's for sure.
Not very long ago either.
So 50 years from now, do you think we'll be coexisting with the grizzly?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. If we contrive to stop the big companies from invading and give the bear a chance, because they've come back a long, long ways to what, you know, when I was a kid, there weren't this many grizzlies around. I can remember when the most grizzlies that I figured was in Waterton Park, and I was traveling the park, carrying cameras and guiding people, and I had a pretty good working knowledge of how many grizzlies we had, and I thought we had 8 in that park. And I'm going to have you know there's a lot more than 8 now.
Andy, if you could do the whole thing over again, what would you change, or would you?
I wouldn't change very much. Not very much, Ian. I sit back here, you know, and I think of the many, many things I've seen and done. And I honestly wouldn't change a hell of a lot. Not much.
Well, Andy, you've presented this film many, many times. It's a great film, and I'd like to see it one more time. Would you show it to us once again?
Oh, sure, I'd love to. If someone were to ask me what is Grizzly Country, I'd say it's a place where the glacier lilies bloom, and in the spring the bears come down to feed on the plants. It's where the streams take their first long jump on their journey to the sea. Grizzly Country is goat country. It's where the mountain goats roam and graze, and they get along well in the same area. There's not much conflict between them. It's where the waters come down from the snowfields and the glaciers. Their streams are swift and high in the spring of the year, and the photographers on the trail looking for bears find a bear track where a spotted sandpiper walks through it. And that is as close as they come to a grizzly that day. It's the Yukon territory where the winds stir the salmon berries, and mountain background, Elsec peaks are there miles and miles and miles. Many of the mountains there not even named. Like this one has no name on the maps, although it's a very spectacular mountain. and we went exploring down the river. The boys here putting our equipment into the boat to go down the Alsac River on an exploration trip. I don't think there'd been very many boats down that river. And getting ready for a trip into strange waters, and believe me, traveling on a strange river with the boat can be pretty adventurous. This particular day, why, we went downstream and we're continually watching for shallow places and find lovely layouts where the lakes and the peaks come together. And the salmon are running. This piece of film was shot during a salmon run on the west coast. It's where the mountains reach across great valleys in Alaska. Where there are moose. And caribou. And grizzly bears. Mother with cubs. And the boys and I are packing the pack train with their loads and getting set for a trip into the mountains. And you see the diamond hitch being thrown here, which is a special hitch that was invented by the Spanish hundreds of years ago and has been used in the mountains ever since. Here the horses take to the trail along the Continental Divide in the back of Waterton Lakes National Park on the west side. And it goes past lakes and vistas of mountains and beautiful country and continual change of scenery every quarter mile. And some of the snow is still lingering in the high places, and you can see the horses here going past a scene that you wouldn't find more spectacular anywhere in the Rockies. Bighorn sheep amongst the flowering bear grass. Rams. Spectacular animals. They have a flair for doing the showy thing. They move with tremendous grace and power in a country that's standing on end. They share their country with bears, and there's no conflict between them because the bears won't try to capture a sheep, believe me. They have no chance. They never have had a opportunity to become accustomed to it in any way. So they share their country peaceably. Some of their territory is perpendicular, or almost. And believe it or not, the grizzly bears cross that kind of country when the occasion arises, and do so very, very smoothly. They're climbers, these mountain animals, believe me. In the heat of the day, they walk up on the snow to cool themselves with a mouthful of snow. And there's some playful butting on a trail that looks pretty narrow in spots for that kind of foolishness. They come out on snow here, and something spooked them. 1 second they're quietly in repose, and the next minute they're on the high run. Our trail takes us up along the foot of the cliffs on the Continental Divide, and there are mountain goats. And this old Billy took us on a merry chase up the steep face of the mountain, where on occasion while we were standing with hundreds of feet of empty space below our hip pockets, it was not a place where you wanted to slip. It's hot. It's the middle of the day, and this old Billy is suffering from the heat just like we are. And he finally got a little fed up with this. We were pretty close to him, and he stood and thought about it for a while, and he turned around and gave us a long look and decided to heck with this, and walks back underneath an overhang. I walked up within 15 feet of him with my camera and filmed the goat wearing only his winter underwear and paying absolutely no attention to his visitor. This is goat country and also grizzly country. I learned a long time ago that following goats into an area like this, one had to be careful. And one day, I was led down a long inclining ledge, and I had to jump across a place where the trail, so-called, was washed away, and I learned something, and I see a goat in a place like this, I'm very inclined to say it's your country, boy, and you can have it. Timberline country, where the mule deer go to spend their summers. Pretty country. And here's a dry doe. She's missed having a fawn, and she's up here summering with the boys. At that time of year, the wildflowers are blooming all over the faces of the mountains. The deer will walk through them, knee-deep. Here comes a buck following the doe. Out of habit, I suppose. He's got his full rack of horns grown up, but they're still on velvet. We get to where we're heading with the pack train, and we proceed to take our house and our food and our beds and everything off the horses and set up a camp. It doesn't take very long, believe me, it doesn't take very long. Pack trains are wonderful, and they can, when you get tired of one location, you can move your whole house to another location and live just as comfortably. It's a great way to travel in summertime. Charlie's busy here setting up our cook tent at the foot of a huge boulder field where the mountain had come apart and slid down at some time in the past and left very little meadow for our tent, but it was comfortable. Here's a creek coming up on the other side of a ridge above our camp. And it heads out of a lake. And there near that lake, there's a mother grizzly with 2 cubs. She's a pretty bear, and she has cubs that are just as pretty as she is. And they're so full of beans that they can be a big nuisance at times, and other times they're real fun to watch. Here she is, scratching herself, for heaven's sake. These 2 miniatures are so full of life and mischief that one would be misled to figure this is the way it goes all the time when they're traveling with their mother, because they're continually looking for something to have fun with. But it's the middle of the day, and it's time for a little nap. And she's lying, having a snooze, and these cubs are propped up against her, and both of them are sleeping too. Beside a little ice-cold mountain stream, and in the midst of mountain flowers, it's a lovely place in the middle of the day in summer. And she's got a visitor coming. And he doesn't come very far. It's a male bear coming down off the slope of the mountain. And she walks out toward him. And he takes one horrified look at how close she is, and he goes up the side of the mountain on the run. He doesn't want any argument with her. She's a tough mother. I got a kick out of him here. He turned around and peeked around the bush to see if she was following or not, and then he turned around and ran again. And she doesn't let it upset her. She just makes sure that he's gone. Then she turns around and proceeds back down to the creek with her cubs. And like all youngsters, they're investigating everything. She has beautiful ivory claws, which you can see right here. Life along a stream in the mountains like this is an idyllic place to be, and the cubs practice walking logs, and they fall in the creek on occasion, and they go with their mother, and she's forgotten something. She's forgotten that she hasn't fed these characters for quite a while. And she gets up and moves up the stream, and unfortunately she stopped behind a bush where she isn't quite as much in view as she should be. And the cameraman's too close to have to shift his location, so we see her gathering the cubs up, and they fasten on one of her dugs each and proceed to have some milk. There are other bears in the valley, too, and there's a mother with 2 yearling cubs. And these two are a continuous source of action, and they're really looking into everything. They're at an age when they can't sit still, and they're taking over an elk wallow and proceed to, well, one of them goes into the elk wallow, and as you can see, this mother is smaller. She's a different color. Here's one of the cubs playing with a big wad of moss swooshing it back and forth in the water. Playing, just playing. No, nothing else but just playing. You know, when they walk in the mountains, they don't seem to be going very fast, but believe me, they're hard to keep up to. They stride out and take long steps, and it's hard to keep up to them. They're going along, and suddenly, why, a coyote showed up, and one cub took after the coyote, and the coyote had to jump up into a root of an upturned spruce to get out of the way, and the cubs couldn't catch him, so they turned around and came back to their mother. The coyote comes out looking disgusted because he's hurt himself a little bit and he's lame. A mother moose grazing on an avalanche track not too far away. She's left her calf cached back in the timber. He's very new and small. She's busy filling up on willows. And the little guy moved, actually. He wasn't supposed to, I'm sure. She left him in a place where he was supposed to stay absolutely still. If a calf is still, they throw very little scent into the air. And that saves them from trouble with predators. Now, this young grizzly is coming down the mountain, and he's got a nose full of that calf odor, and he's thinking of a meal of a moose calf would just be about right at this point in the day, and he's trying to relocate it again, having lost it. And there's another silver-tip type coming down a log not too far away. The grizzly has found a series of deadfall logs, all pointing in the right direction, and he's following them up the mountain and passes a mother spruce hen with her brood, and she's not very frightened of him. She steps out of the way and lets him go by. And the grizzly keeps coming closer and closer. And this little guy had better not even let his ears wiggle. He's really close and in great danger. The bear hasn't located him. The winds has shifted, and he hasn't been able to smell him. He comes within yards of this animal. And then he turns, and he goes away. And the calf moose will live to enjoy another day. This is Grizzly Country in southeast corner of British Columbia. High, rugged country with lots of snow still lingering in the drifts. And acres and acres of flowers. Many kinds of alpine flowers bloom here, and it's a spot where a mountain ptarmigan has her nest. She matches her background in summer and winter. Wintertime, there's snow white. These mountain flowers are every color of the rainbow. Paintbrush and forget-me-nots. There's just about everything you can think of by way of alpine flowers growing there. And we have run out of food, and we're having to leave camp and go home for another load of grub because we're going to be hungry if we don't. And so we take off and go home. And about 5 days later, we're in the Yukon Territory, way north of where we live. And the salmon berries grow, and the Alsek Mountains fill the background. Grizzly Country. Miles and miles and miles of grizzly country. So big that it's sometimes hard to find a grizzly. On the way in there, we were aware that it was very dry and that the country was on fire in places. And when we got to Haines Junction in the Yukon Territory, the village was threatened by a forest fire that just started. And we undertook to fight with and two other fellows, one driving a cat and the other one was the boss. He was our forestry man, and we fought that fire all day, all afternoon. And it was hot and smoky and miserable. We had no water. We fought it with dry dirt with that bulldozer blade. We'd cover the flames with dry dirt, so we had to stop them if we could. And we managed to keep it within reach of the time. It was the moose, and they took off, all the game take off, and there's two cow moose swimming in the lake. They leave their calves behind, hidden in the brush, and of course the calves get burnt. It's too bad. That had to be the hottest afternoon I ever spent in my whole life, I think. When we got through with that, we held it and got the thing out, and then we took off. Oh, we launched our boat in the Alsek River and headed downstream on an exploration trip. And you see the boys getting our equipment stowed away here. And for the day's run, we were only going out and back in a day. And actually, we're looking for a way down into the Alsek River, and it was a very interesting place. Lots of scenery, lots of game tracks on the bars and beaches along the shore. We get down the river was pretty to travel on for a ways. It was beautiful. We were careful because rivers have a habit of reaching up underneath your boat and snagging your propeller. With an outboard motor like this, we had to be careful. It's a long ways to a repair shop in that country, believe me. We were taking great care. We saw caribou tracks on the bars along that bank, and we saw grizzly tracks, and they weren't very old. And there were sheep and goats on that mountain slope. It was interesting. It was really interesting. Then we ran into kind of a broad place, more like a lake than anything else, and the water became shallow. And because the wind had stirred the bottom up, why, we couldn't see the channel where the river had made a channel in the middle. And we kept breaking our prop pins, and we finally got out of there and went back and found another river up above the Des Diaches Lakes, and we worked on that. It was a place where you had to be very, very careful, as you can see. And it was not a place where one got out of patience and in a hurry. We got over onto the Bates River, over a pass or a portage. When we stopped to camp for the night, why, Charlie took his fly rod out onto the river and proceeded to catch our supper. Arctic grayling, thousands of them. The bottom of that river was green with Arctic grayling. And it wasn't much of a problem to catch enough fish for supper, believe me. Charlie caught enough for our meal, but then he kept going and turning the fish loose. Catch and release. Those streams in the Arctic are beautifully clear in summertime. You can see down into the water for a long ways. The bottom is visible most of the time. One fish after another. Dick and I were watching, and Dick decided he had to get in on this, so he went and got his spinning outfit, hunting big game. Charlie's activity here was catching. Dick put on a spinner and threw it out across that big pool and retrieved it. And a big trout rose up out of the bottom and grabbed the spoon. Now, it was a surprise to us, but there was lake trout in this river. We were between Bates Lake and Mush Lake. And the lake trout apparently summered some of the, well, they were big fish, but they'd only weighed, the biggest of them weighed about 6 or 7 pounds. Dick had a great time with this one. He finally got him halter broken and let him in for his brother to release. We sure didn't need another fish, so we turned him loose. This was the top of a portage, and we had to move everything over our falls and down into the Bates River again, and we had a visitor. Here was a black bear standing on the portage watching the boys go by, carrying our gear. I stayed back and cut them back to where we'd left the rest of our stuff piled up, just to be sure that bear didn't come out. And there he was, looking out of the brush at me. And I quietly told him he better behave himself, and he took my word for it. I had no problems with him. And we finally got our stuff moved and back in the boats in the river on the lower side of the falls. And we took off down the Bates River and left the bear. And the bear was laid under a tree watching us go with a great disappointment written on his face. And he wanted us to stay. He thought he needed some company up there. Anyhow, we took off down the Bates River into the Bates Lake and down Bates Lake for quite some distance. And I was absolutely amazed at the scenery. My gosh, it was beautiful. And I thought to myself, this should be a national park. And you know, that thought blossomed. My friend Elliot Trudeau was Prime Minister at that time, and I persuaded him we needed a park there, so now we have Kluane Park. It was a place where you had lots of tracks to look at right in front of the door of the tent. Grizzly bear and caribou and moose. Stories written in the sand. A shot of the green coastal water and a boat that we used to get up a river. We had this boat, which was a freight boat and civilized, and we had a civilized boat. This was it. It had 2 speeds, 50 miles an hour, and dead stop. And it was rough in the waves. Believe me, it was like riding a bucking horse. That was a big river. Swift. I didn't trust that boat. The guy that handled it did. And here you see him going at normal speed through the logs. Looked to me like a hell of a good way to keep him getting old. There were thousands and millions of salmon in that country, and the only river that I really cared about, you couldn't get a boat into it. I got cured of boats pretty fast in that country. It seemed like we were going through water that was totally impassable every day. The salmon are in this little stream, the Wakwash River. They were there by the thousands, so sometimes packed so thick that their backs were sticking out of the water. And the male here is teasing a female to build a red. And a red is a fish's nest. And it's made out of, by pushing the coarse rock out of the way and burying the fine gravel, whereupon she lays her eggs and the male comes in and throws sperm down over the eggs and they're fertilized. And they stay there all winter, and in the spring they hatch, and the young fish go down the stream to the lakes. There was lots and lots of salmon there. My goodness sake, it was beyond belief. Dog salmon, coho salmon, and sockeye salmon. It was tough country to get around in. This devil's club, which is a diabolical plant, grew 12 feet high in places, and there's a million thorns on every plant. And they're poisonous. If you get too many of them, they'll make you pretty sick. There was also a kind of mushroom that grew there that was 2 feet across. And I've found the name of this thing somewhere, and it was a very complex name, and I've felt better ever since I've forgotten what it was. And one day the plane came in, picked us up, and we had to go out. And the next place we went to look for grizzlies with our cameras was Alaska. And Alaska is a place where the sun never really goes down in the early part of the summer. The high peaks are lit up with the sun all night. Sunset never really stops there at night. It's like this. The peaks are high, and there's Denali. In the background, Denali is a high peak. It's the highest in North America, 20,320 feet at its top. That country is full of sheep, and these are the Dall sheep at the north. They're snowy white, and these are shedding off. The skin is black, but the hair is shedding off, and the black skin is showing through here and there in spots, and we were entertained by being able to film mothers with their lambs, and the little lambs were a constant source of fun as far as we were concerned. They were always doing something that was interesting. They hardly ever laid down. It was amazing. It's no wonder that these fellows grow up to be tough climbers. Look at that, right up on his mother's back with his feet. One night at 2 o'clock in the morning, I heard rocks rolling and feet clattering. And I looked out, and we were smack in the path. Our tent was pitched right smack in the path of the caribou and migration. And we proceeded to get footage, believe me. And I realized after I'd been at it a few days that I was taking an awful lot of footage of caribou. And so I tried to quit. But in spite of my best intentions, I kept shooting film. And the reason was that they were continually doing something that was really interesting. We walked for miles looking for grizzlies and sometimes found them. The caribou were constantly there. We were rarely out of sight of them. They were going by us in bunches up to 50, 60, 70. And I'd long since tried to quit shooting film, but this night I saw this sight of a lot of caribou, and the light was behind us. And they were going over a pass, and I just couldn't resist taking more footage of caribou. There was cows and calves and yearlings and bulls and every kind of caribou that you'd ever think of. And one morning, we got up, and there were caribou on the snow on top of the mountain above our camp, and they were surging around back and forth, fighting flies up there on this snow. And Charlie and I climbed up to get within camera range of them. And we got some spectacular stuff of these animals fighting flies. They rarely stopped back and forth. They were on the run on this snow. And a caribou bull came down off the top of the mountain behind them and went into the bunch on the run and spooked them, and they all took off down the side of Hogback Ridge leading into Thoroughfare River Valley. And I ran around under them with my camera, and I got a shot of these bulls. They were all bulls, and very unusual to see this. And their antlers were pretty well grown. So there were lots of antlers sticking up. They headed down the valley on the run. Well, we followed them down into the thoroughfare and down the thoroughfare to where it ran into the McKinley River Valley. And there, when we got to the McKinley River, we climbed up on the slope and saw the sight of about 3,000 caribou out on the braided branches of the river fighting flies. And I got this unusual shot. They were still on the move when they got going farther north. Steadily on the move, heading for their summer pasture. Leaving behind them places in the snow where wolves had caught up to stragglers and where grizzly bears had come and polished off the wolf kills. There's a wolf. Now it looks like he's pursuing that caribou. That was purely accident. They were just both running on the same trail in the same direction. There was not a pursuit. One morning, we spotted where the wolves had killed a caribou on one of the little streams that come down off the mountain slopes back of our camp, and the grizzly bear came on the wind, up against the wind, and found that kill while it was still warm, and proceeded to fill up. And Charlie located right beside him and filmed him feeding on this carcass, and he got thirsty in the course of the morning and went to get himself a drink out of this creek, and proceeded to have his drink, and while he was there, a magpie came floating by, heading for his kill. And there he goes. And the bear took after the magpie and chased him off the kill and slipped on the rocks and came down clunk on his chin, which is something you don't see very often. And he looked the situation over and he decided that the only way he could get this meat that he was feeding on out of the way would be to bury it. So he started to dig a hole to bury it. And it was very hot, and he finally said, "To hell with this." And he went and sat down and proceeded just to lay there and guard it. And he was right in the middle of a flower patch. Pretty little flowers all over that slope. That's the Arctic poppy. It grows profusely over miles and miles of that country. Heliotrope. The flowers in the Arctic are very beautiful. I had a lens that I'd bought and was very proud of. It was a 20-power lens. And I hooked it on my camera. I had to use a special kind of mount for it because it was so heavy. And I don't know what I intended to do with that lens, but I guess I figured I could sit in the mountainside in Alaska and shoot bears in British Columbia. Didn't work that way. I got a few pictures with it that were worth saving, but for the most part it was prone to being shook. It's a jaeger from a predatory gull that nests in North America and winters in Japan. And when you get close to their eggs, they get pretty threatening and screaming at you. They dive down. One of them got caught in Dick's hair. And it was really, they just continually dive-bombed us while we were close to that nest. And a pretty bird. Very unlovely voice, though. Above 6,000 feet, these mountains are swathed in ice and snow all year round. Below 6,000 feet is where the game is. And this caribou bull is having a bad time with flies. He kicks a big cloud of tundra out of the way, and he'd like to be able to crawl in a hole and hide because of the flies. And he finally takes off on the run and heads up onto the top of a peak. And Dick and I are, as usual, looking for bears. And, you know, we found bears quite often. Here's a beautiful big old male doing what bears do. People don't realize how much they do graze, because it's they're just like a cow. They'll be out there grazing away and filling up on new green grass, and when they get full, they lay down and go to sleep and get up and fill up again. And when they are through with that, they can feed on the berries that have ripened. Now, we ran into this 3-year-old cub, and he'd been recently turned loose on the world by his mother, and he was very nervous and very unsure of himself, and because of that, he was kind of a problem, and we were pretty close to him. And we thought that he needed a little education, but we didn't exactly know how to give it to him. We told him a couple of times that he was an unruly, miserable character, but it didn't seem to make any difference. And he went down the mountain and then turned around and came up the mountain to meet us again, and using very bad language. And he was eating stuff that no grizzly bear in its right mind would eat. And what he was doing was proving his position on the mountain by eating junk, brush, any old thing. Must have had a horrible bellyache when he finally disappeared. Then we found Blondie and her cub was a yearling. And Blondie was a pretty smart mama. She would feed this cub, and then she'd play with him. As there were just two of them, and the cub didn't have a partner to amuse him, so she, realizing that he had to do some playing, she played with him. And the play got pretty rough sometimes, and we thought, good Lord, she'd kill him. She'd grab him and shake him. And but she never seemed to do more than ruffle the fur. And they had a great time. And the cub got tired of it. He'd finally take off. Well, then we saw an eagle up on the ridge. And top of a mountain, actually, and Dick and I did something we knew very well was usually an impractical move. We climbed up there, and, we get close enough to get pictures he took off, and I shot this fellow 7 foot across the wings going down over the valley. Then I saw a bush down below me. It didn't look too like it should. And I climbed down, and lo and behold, what got out of that bush, you wouldn't believe. I looked at those antlers, and I'm used to judging antlers, and I figured this fellow was 6 feet across the spread. And he paid no more attention to me after he got out of that nest in the willows than if I wasn't there. And I didn't need to use a telephoto lens. I could take him with the regular 1-inch lens and get some really spectacular stuff. I was within feet of him. He absolutely ignored me. Alaska's moose are big. I figured this fellow weighed about 1,800 pounds. And here he goes, walking along with a mountain background. And there in that same country, sharing it with them, was a grizzly bear with her cubs. And if you ever saw professional berry pickers at work, here they are. They aren't very old, but they sure know how to pick berries. These are yearling cubs, and this is what they're picking. Huckleberries. Sweet, juicy, and delicious. And they ate them literally by the gallon. And then the cubs just got a little perturbed because coming into the same berry patch with them was a big old male, and Mama and the cubs took off. They didn't want to get too close to him. The cubs are a bit in danger where males are concerned, because males sometimes kill them. But Mama was very particular about who got close to her cubs. And she got tired of moving, so she turned around and went back. And she was pretty close to this old boy. He was a ragged-looking old character. And her hair was starting to stand up. She was getting angry. The cubs were beside themselves. They spent a lot of time on their hind feet, even trying to walk on their hind feet. It didn't work worth a cent. They can't do it. You can just see the hair on the back rising up. She's running out of patience. All of a sudden, she charges. And they put their noses together, and you could have heard them for 2 miles roaring at each other. And I don't know what they said, but they apparently came to some kind of agreement. Because she went back to her cubs, and he began picking berries and was very polite. And I got a picture that's very, very rare of 4 grizzlies in one frame. A person can be watching grizzlies for a long time before he gets a chance like this. And you can see he's being respectful. And there was no more trouble between them, although the cubs didn't believe that he meant what he'd said because they were very nervous. Now here's a Arctic ground squirrel, locally known as a siksik. That's the Indian name for him. And it's August, and he's thinking about going to bed for the winter. He's gathering up bedding. And he fills his mouth and puts more hay in his mouth than you'd believe a squirrel could move with, and turns around. He'd forgotten one piece. It fell on his back, and he buried it. And then a little later, after 6 or 7 of these squirrels get into the same nest, the grizzly bear digs down, and you know, I believe they eat them like oysters. They don't even chew them. I've watched them do it many times, and they have to dig about 18 inches down. Well, then one day, there was a mama with 2 cubs, and we found out very shortly that she was very particular about who she let get close to those cubs, and we had our problems. Believe me, she charged us, and she meant business. And I'm sure if we'd run a foot, why, she'd have killed us, but she didn't. We didn't, so she didn't. And here's a mother with a tiny cub. And you know, I couldn't figure her out. She would stand for me in the same patch of brush with her until I got close enough to do some filming, and then she would show fight, and I couldn't figure her out. And I realized that she was blind. And this particular day, Charlie and I got a chance to film her. Charlie got close to her with a camera about 25 yards from her. Here she is with her cub suckling. She's a happy old girl. She can't see. You look carefully when she turns her head in the sun, and you can see the milky cast over her eyes. See that? She's got cataracts, and I mean bad cataracts. Charlie was having a ball, hiding the sound of the camera in the wind. The wind was blowing. And he got so enthralled with his photography that he didn't watch the wind. And the wind went down. And Mama heard the camera. She got up, and she's trying to figure out what disturbed her. And the cub saw Charlie, but he was very good. He didn't tell Mama what he'd seen. And she went the right direction. And this squirrel sitting up on a snag watched the whole procedure. while he was eating his lunch. And then another bear I saw, which I thought was an albino. And I trailed this bear for 3 days trying to get a picture of him. And finally I went up on the side of a mountain in the wind where there was no mosquitoes, and I thought, well, if he wanted his picture taken, he could come to me. And here's that old girl with the 2 cubs that I was telling you about. She was very, very touchy about us getting close. And these rivers running down out of the glaciers are braided streams running through gravel, and here she is crossing the Toklat River with a bull caribou. Beautiful animals. I hope they grew up with better disposition than her mother. I remember caribou outlined against the sky. I remember catching up to bears and getting very close to these animals with the camera. It was thrilling. It was very rewarding because we'd never done this kind of thing before. Nobody had. And we got real close-ups. And as you can see, we weren't very far away, though it wasn't taken with a long lens because if it had been, the background would have been blurred. I remember seeing these big bull moose dipping their antlers in the waters of Wonder Lake. And when I look at it, I think it'd be fun to go back there and have another look.
The Grizzly Country film was important in its day, but it's even more important today because of shrinking habitat. The grizzlies taught Andy Russell, and Andy taught us. It was as if he opened a door for a whole new future generation of conservationists. A couple of summers ago, my little girl saw a silver-tipped grizzly and her 2 cubs right up on the top of the Highwood Pass near where we live. I like to think it's because of the work of Andy Russell that future generations of kids may have the thrill of seeing those great bears in Grizzly Country.